The camera glides over a quiet English suburb, rooftops glowing under a fading amber sky. Inside a pristine white brick home, Emily Whitmore sets the dinner table. The clinking of cutlery echoes faintly against the hum of an expensive life. Her husband, Dr. Nathan Whitmore, a respected surgeon, walks in wearing that easy smile everyone adored. Neighbors called them the model couple, successful, charming, unshakably in love. But behind the porcelain glow of domestic bliss, something had begun to fracture. Nathan's phone buzzed against the counter. A message flashed briefly before he turned it face down. "We need to talk." Emily caught the words, her heart stuttering, but she said nothing. He was tired, she told herself. Long hours at the hospital? Patience, not secrets. She smiled, pretending she hadn't seen it. Later that night, as Nathan showered, she gathered his shirt from the floor. A faint floral scent drifted up, not her perfume. Her fingers froze, her throat tightening. She pressed the fabric to her face, breathing in the scent as if it might explain everything. When he stepped out, she was back in bed, feigning sleep, the glow of her phone illuminating tear tracks that refused to dry. Narration. Emily had always believed marriages cracked quietly, in invisible ways, but theirs was splitting open like a wound under pressure. At a weekend dinner, Nathan laughed with friends, his hand resting gently on her knee. To anyone watching, they looked perfect. Yet Emily's gaze was distant, her wine untouched. When she reached for his phone under the table, he caught her wrist mid-motion, his grip gentle but firm. "Nathan, trust is the foundation of everything, isn't it?" It used to be. The silence that followed was heavier than accusation. That night, Nathan stayed in his study until dawn. The soft glow of his computer bled through the keyhole, while Emily sat on the stairs, listening. When she finally rose, her eyes were hollow, her jaw set. Description. Rain began to patter softly against the windows as the camera lingers on a framed family photo. The Whitmores smiling at the seaside. Children laughing. A husband's arm around a wife who no longer sleeps. Narration. Every secret begins as a small shadow. In the Whitmore home, it had already started to spread. Emily reached for her phone and opened a new note. Typing slowly, "Something isn't right with Nathan." The camera zooms in on her trembling hand before cutting to black. The sound that woke Emily wasn't the usual hum of the morning kettle. It was silence. Nathan's side of the bed was empty again, the sheets still cool. She checked the clock, 3:47 a.m. The light in his office was on. For a moment she stood by the door, watching the faint glow seeping from beneath it. Then she turned away, her heart pacing faster than her steps. By day, Nathan seemed unchanged. He still kissed her cheek before leaving for the hospital, still smiled at their children, still told stories about long surgeries and tired nights. But the hours between those words had begun to vanish. His petrol receipts didn't match the miles on his car. His business trips didn't appear on the hospital's rota. And the number that often called him, marked only as consultancy, never answered back when she tried it. Emily started keeping notes, hiding them beneath the false bottom of her jewelry box. Every small inconsistency, every faint scent, every missing hour. The list grew longer with each passing day, and her handwriting grew shakier. One Friday, she waited for him to leave before taking her car. The night was wet and windless, the kind that swallowed sound. She followed the silver BMW through winding roads until the town lights faded into black. The car slowed, turning down a narrow track toward a woodland clearing. There, through the mist, stood a small timber cabin, its windows glowing amber against the dark. Emily parked a distance away, heart thudding against her ribs. Laughter floated through the still air, a woman's voice light and carefree. She saw a shadow move across the curtain, tall and familiar, leaning close to another. Rain began to fall harder, drumming against the windshield. Emily's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. For a long time, she sat there, staring at that flickering light, her tears mixing with the rain until both became one blurred reflection. When she finally drove home, the roads were empty, the night stretched thin and endless. She entered the house quietly, hung up her coat, and climbed into bed beside the ghost of a man she no longer knew. At breakfast, she smiled as Nathan kissed her cheek, her voice steady as she asked about his meeting. He lied without blinking. Later, in her diary, she wrote just one sentence in neat, deliberate letters. "He's not the man I married." A gust of wind slammed against the window, scattering the pages of her notes across the floor. Among them, one receipt caught her eye. A petrol station time-stamped for a night he claimed to be on call. The same night she had followed him. The receipt lay where the wind had dropped it, a quiet accusation on the polished floorboards. Emily picked it up, tracing the faint numbers with her thumb. The same petrol station from the night she followed him, but this time 2 transactions, one for fuel, another for cash withdrawal. Her stomach turned. Nathan had told her he never carried cash. The next morning, she met her oldest friend, Clara Hensley, at a small cafe near the river. Steam curled from their untouched teacups as Emily slid the receipt across the table. Clara had always been sharp, practical, unshaken by scandal. When Emily told her about the cabin and the perfume, Clara's expression changed from sympathy to alarm. "I know someone who works in private banking," she said quietly. "If he's hiding something, they can find it." A week later, Clara returned with an envelope. Inside was a printout of a statement in Nathan's name, an account Emily had never seen before. The balance was staggering, with regular withdrawals of £5,000, each labeled only as personal. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "What could he possibly need that for?" That evening, she waited until the children were asleep before confronting him. Nathan stood by the window, his reflection fractured in the glass as she spoke. "I found your other account," she said. "The one you didn't tell me about." He turned, his voice calm, almost gentle. "You're imagining things again, Em. You really should see someone." The way he said it, soft, pitying, rehearsed, hollowed her out. He kissed her forehead, the gesture cold as marble, then walked away. For the first time, she felt afraid of her husband. That night, she searched his study while he slept. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she slid open drawers, sifted through papers, and found a small black safe beneath his desk. The combination was written on the inside of a book spine, Anatomy of Lies. Inside lay bundles of cash, a passport, and a key marked Westmore Storage 19. Emily took none of it. She simply closed the safe, stepped back, and decided to learn what he was hiding without confronting him again. The next morning, she ordered a small surveillance camera online, disguised as a pen. When it arrived, she hid it on the shelf of his study, angled toward the desk as the screen fades to black. The sound of Nathan's office door closing fills the air, followed by the soft hum of the hidden camera switching on. The next evening, the study door stayed closed longer than usual. The faint rhythm of Nathan's voice drifted through the corridor, low and clipped, like someone speaking in a language meant only for secrets. Emily waited in the darkened hallway, the soft red light of the hidden pen camera blinking steadily. When the house finally went silent, she crept inside, retrieved the device, and slipped it into her dressing gown pocket. In her bedroom, she plugged it into her laptop, her pulse unsteady as the screen flickered to life. At first, there was only the sound of rustling papers and Nathan muttering under his breath. Then another voice broke through, sharp, female, trembling with anger. "You promised me, Nathan. You said you'd fix this." His tone hardened. "I am fixing it. But if anyone finds out, we're both dead." Emily froze. The woman's voice sounded young, urgent, frightened. He moved closer to the camera, his face half lit by the desk lamp, his expression colder than she had ever seen. The conversation grew heated. Fragments about money, threats, and something about her not surviving another mistake. When the recording ended, Emily sat motionless, the glow of the screen painting her face pale. She replayed the clip again, catching the moment the woman's name slipped through Nathan's clenched teeth. Hannah Reed. The name rang in her mind long after she shut the laptop. Later that night, unable to sleep, she searched the name online. Missing persons notice filled the screen. Hannah Reed, 29. Last seen near Bristol 2 months ago. Emily's throat tightened. The date matched one of Nathan's supposed business trips. The next morning, she printed the footage and left it in an unmarked envelope at the local police station. She didn't sign her name. She didn't have to. The recording spoke for itself. Days passed in dreadful stillness. Nathan remained calm, affectionate even, as if nothing had changed. But Emily could barely meet his gaze. Every smile, every word felt rehearsed. On the fourth night, a knock shattered the quiet. Blue lights flashed across the rain-slicked driveway, cutting through the darkness. Nathan opened the door, confusion flickering across his face as two detectives stepped forward. "Dr. Whitmore," one said, his tone firm but polite, "we'd like to ask you a few questions regarding a missing woman named Hannah Reed." Nathan turned slowly, his eyes finding Emily standing behind him. A smile returned, small and deliberate. "Of course, officers," he said. "My wife will make us some tea." The camera lingers on Emily's pale face, her reflection trembling in the rain-streaked glass as the officers step inside. The officers' voices echoed down the hall as they questioned Nathan in calm, measured tones. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, the smell of wet earth clinging to her senses. She could hear fragments of conversation, words like missing, associate, evidence. Her hands shook as she poured the tea he had requested, though her mind screamed for her to run. 2 days later, a warrant arrived. The detectives returned, this time with quiet purpose. Nathan's car had been traced to a remote area near the Somerset border, a small unregistered property. When they asked Emily if she knew of any cabin he owned, she could only shake her head, voice caught in her throat. The next morning, police cars moved through the misty woodland. The cabin stood in silence, small and forgotten, ivy creeping across its roof. Inside, the air was thick with damp and decay. A single lamp hung from the ceiling, illuminating the chaos beneath. Broken glass, scattered photographs, and the faint smear of something dark across the floorboards. Detective Rowe knelt near a patch of disturbed soil by the hearth and pulled free a delicate silver necklace, its chain broken. The engraved nameplate read, "Hannah." Behind a stack of rotting newspapers, they found photographs. Hannah smiling beside Nathan, both standing in front of that same cabin. When the images reached Emily, she felt her stomach twist until she could barely breathe. They brought her to the station that evening. She sat across from the detectives, the fluorescent light above flickering softly. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice trembling, barely more than air. "I swear I didn't know what he was doing." Detective Rowe studied her carefully. "Mrs. Whitmore, we believe your husband may have been involved in Hannah Reed's disappearance. The evidence suggests she was here, with him." Emily's eyes blurred, tears slipping down her face. In the reflection of the glass, she saw Nathan being led through the corridor, his wrists bound. He didn't struggle. He didn't speak. When the detectives paused to photograph him, he turned his head slightly toward the interrogation room. Their eyes met through the glass. He smiled faintly, that same calm, surgical composure she once admired. "You shouldn't have gone through my things, Em," he said, voice low but clear. Her breath caught. For a moment, she could no longer tell whether the man she had married was capable of horror or simply born from it. As Nathan was escorted away, his expression never changed, calm, deliberate, expectant. Emily sat in the cold room, trembling, knowing the nightmare was only beginning. Outside, the police lights cut through the rain as a forensic van pulled up to the cabin, and a detective's voice echoed from the radio. "We've found something else." The discovery at the cabin ignited a storm that swept through the quiet town of Alderley. By morning, every newspaper carried Nathan Whitmore's name. Respected surgeon charged in lover's disappearance. Beneath the headline, a photo of Emily stared back, her face drained, eyes unfocused. Neighbors whispered behind closed curtains, sympathy shifting into suspicion. At the station, detectives pieced together fragments of Nathan's life that no one had ever known. A second passport under the name Daniel Hurst. Offshore accounts linked to shell companies in Malta and Cyprus. Transfers amounting to hundreds of thousands of pounds. The trail of deceit stretched back nearly 5 years. Hannah Reed wasn't just his mistress. She had been his accomplice in a fraudulent life insurance scheme targeting dying patients. The more they uncovered, the darker the web became. Hannah's flat was stripped bare, her bank account emptied 2 days before she vanished. Yet one transaction stood out. A large sum transferred to an account in Emily's name. When questioned, Emily's confusion was genuine, but her words sounded hollow against the evidence. "I never saw that money," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't even know those accounts existed." Detective Rowe watched her carefully, his tone measured but probing. Your fingerprints were found on the storage unit key discovered in the safe. Can you explain that? Emily blinked, shaking her head. I only touched it when I found the safe open. I didn't take anything. Her hands trembled, but her mind kept circling the same thought. Nathan had planned this. Every breadcrumb led not just to him, but through her. The deception was surgical, deliberate, and cruel. Back home, the once serene Whitmore house had become a crime scene. Police tape lined the drive, and flashes from cameras cut through the drizzle as evidence teams searched every inch. Inside, Emily found herself surrounded by ghosts. The life she thought she lived now reduced to photographs and labeled bags. That night, she sat alone in the kitchen, the low hum of the refrigerator the only sound. She stared at her reflection in the blackened window, barely recognizing herself. The image looked guilty, broken, complicit. In the reflection behind her, blue lights flickered once more. A car door slammed outside and footsteps approached the front door. Emily rose, dread tightening her chest as a knock split the silence. When she opened it, Detective Rowe stood in the rain, holding a file. His expression was unreadable. Mrs. Whitmore, he said quietly, we need to talk about what your husband was really planning. The camera lingers on her face as thunder rolls across the darkened sky, setting the stage for what comes next. A month passed since Nathan's arrest, yet the shadow he left behind refused to fade. Reporters still hovered near the Whitmore house, cameras flashing whenever Emily dared to leave. The town that once praised her now looked at her with suspicion. She kept the curtains closed, her phone silent, and her thoughts locked inside the same spiral of guilt and confusion. On a gray morning, a package arrived without a return address. The handwriting on the label stopped her breath. Neat, deliberate, unmistakably his. Nathan's handwriting. She carried it to the kitchen table, hands trembling as she cut the tape. Inside lay a small black USB drive and a single folded note. The truth isn't what you think. The words seemed to hum in her ears. Against every instinct, she plugged the drive into her laptop. The screen filled with static before resolving into the dim image of Nathan seated in what looked like a concrete room, perhaps a storage space. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his expression calm. She thought she could leave, he said, his voice steady. She didn't know Emily knew everything. Emily's pulse surged. Her name echoed in the room, cold and deliberate. Nathan leaned forward, eyes glinting in the low light. I killed Hannah Reed, he continued. Not for love. For money. She was going to expose us. I couldn't let that happen. Her scream ripped through the house, echoing down the hallway. The laptop fell to the floor, the recording still playing. The calm in Nathan's voice felt inhuman, like someone describing a surgical procedure rather than a murder. When the police arrived, the video was already looping. Emily's statement was fragmented, her voice shaking. He sent it to me. He's trying to destroy me. I swear I didn't know any of this. The tech division traced the file's metadata. It had been edited, several cuts stitched together, portions of audio distorted. Parts of the background didn't match the prison's environment. Someone had manufactured the confession, but who? Detective Rowe watched the footage in silence. If this was meant to scare you, he said, it's working. But whoever did this wanted you to break before the truth came out. That night, Emily sat on the floor beside her bed, the broken laptop beside her. The flickering light from the street cast long shadows across the walls, one of them stretching tall and thin, like a man standing in the doorway. Her eyes lifted slowly, her breath catching in her throat. The faint outline of a figure vanished as the lights flickered out. Winter came cruelly that year, burying the town in silence and frost. The story of Nathan Whitmore had faded from headlines, replaced by fresher scandals, newer tragedies. Yet the woods that bordered the river still held their secret. Waiting, it was a pair of hikers who found her. What was left of Hannah Reed lay half buried in ice, her hair tangled with roots, her bones threaded through with soil. A necklace glinted faintly beneath the frozen surface, the same silver one taken from the cabin months ago. By nightfall, the riverbank had become a swarm of flashing lights and quiet horror. Detectives in heavy coats marked the perimeter, their breaths clouding the air. Forensics moved carefully, cataloging the scene. Within hours, DNA results confirmed what the world already believed. Nathan Whitmore was guilty of murder. But when the medical examiner released the full report, the room fell into a thick, uneasy silence. Hannah hadn't died when Nathan claimed. The estimated time of death was nearly 48 hours later. Nathan had been under police surveillance then, locked away, awaiting trial. Someone else had been there. Detective Rowe spread the files across his desk, his jaw tightening. Whoever finished this wanted us to keep looking at him, not them. The photo of Hannah's remains sat beside one of Emily, pale and withdrawn, giving another weary interview to the press. She had moved back into the family home, refusing to leave the place where it had all begun. That evening, the camera finds her again, sitting inside the same cabin where the lies first took root. Dust hangs in the air like smoke, and the faint hum of wind seeps through the broken window. Emily's face is gaunt, her eyes fixed on the floor. "He was supposed to stop," she whispers, her voice barely a breath. "He promised." A half-empty wine glass trembles in her hand. On the table beside her lies the same leather-bound diary from months before, pages filled with ink-stained confessions and restless nights. She turns one final page and stares at a photograph tucked inside. It shows Nathan and Hannah together, smiling in the sunlight. But behind the lens, the shadow on the ground reveals another figure, smaller, unmistakable. Camera in hand, her. The frame lingers on her face as she closes the diary, pressing her palm against it as though to smother a memory that refuses to die. Outside, police sirens echo faintly in the distance, carried by the wind toward the river. The screen fades to black, leaving only the sound of rustling pages and a single line of narration. In every perfect marriage, there's someone willing to lie and someone willing to kill to keep it that way.